It is time once again to check on our favorite human Tondomorphous blob. It seems today he has chosen the game from... Sorry guys, I can't handle French accents anymore since... ham. Also, I'm pretty sure every review ever for this game, or at least I know Johnny's opens with that joke, so I'll cut to the chase. Let's talk about SpongeBob SquarePants, Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. A licensed game and a platformer? You'd think I'd hate it on merit, but then I'd be stupid. Younger me would also be a fool, as this comes from around his time, well, the original on GameCube. If you haven't guessed my age with my other videos, past me loves SpongeBob, particularly seasons 1 through 3, as like The Simpsons, the writing still holds up. Sharp witticism mixed with absurdity, to me, is a cornerstone of comedy and one that SpongeBob easily lands. Back then though, I didn't catch the higher quality writing, but the scenarios the characters found themselves in were more than worth a laugh. Take Graveyard Shift, One Crab's Trash, Pre-Hibernation Week, and the mini specials, not even including the crown jewel that was the first movie. So of course I'd want to get a game of one of my favorite shows back then, and then rebuy its remaster. It's gonna be one of those episodes on the game front, as spoiler warning, when I bought Rehydrated, I 100%ed it the day of. If I have to tell any one of you motherfuckers about SpongeBob in this section, you're as alien as I am. Go home. You don't belong here. For the rest of us, at the center of this game's history is THQ, an irony that doesn't escape me, as the company, in between the releases of the original Battle for Bikini Bottom and Rehydrated, saw death and rebirth through Nordic, branding itself as THQ Nordic. Because of the extraneous circumstances I've found myself in, as while both games are separated by almost 2 decades and on the technical level can be considered different experiences, I feel obligated to at least mention who was behind what for the first outing. Developed by Heavy Iron Studios, BfBBR was the relatively new developer's third game, coming after Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights and Evil Dead Hail to the King. Honestly, the development of BfBBR is blander than the gruel served to Mrs. Puff, as THQ was a known licensed publisher. From Attack of the Killer Tomatoes to WWF and the WCW, to even Ghost in the Shell and other Nickelodeon properties like Ren and Stimpy and Rugrats, THQ had hands in a number of pies. Inversely, Heavy Iron's backstory is one worth telling, a winding road connecting itself to EA Canada and Squaresoft. Traveling that path was Steve Gray, who details in an interview with Obsolete Gamer that his first career choice was to be a rock star, and I played the clubs a lot in LA and up and down the California coast. At that time, I also worked in the feature film special effects business, which I continued to do until the early 90s when I was a VP technology at Digital Domain. That's when we made True Lies, Interview with the Vampire, Apollo 13. When the PlayStation 1 came out, and I decided I really wanted to get into video games instead. Per the words of the grandiose hit by Nickelback, "'Cause we all just want to be big rock stars," but turns out girls and drugs don't come easy or cheap. That's why you work in software, Gray basing his operation out of Robert Abel and Associates, Tron, before moving on to Rhythm and Hughes, The Faculty, and Digital Domain. While those former two might not be as recognizable to some, if you've seen Cape Shit in the Year of Our Lord, congratulations, you know about Digital Domain, sucking the life out of action sequences and goodwill from people, as they are also the ones behind Virtual Tupac. How I clamber for the days of The Fifth Element when I didn't have to be a witness to man-made horrors beyond my comprehension.
I say this as a gross blob thing.
They're the whipping boy to other people's insanity, as corporate Disney is the one that comes up with those mosh pits of Gray, and Dr. Dre plus Snoop Dogg and a few other artists ushered in an identity-based nightmare. Where was I before I veered into anti-big tech and corporations for this video on a children's video game? That's right. Video games. Digital wanted to break into the industry, forcing Steve and fellow colleague Chris McKibben to shop for a partner. As the man explains, Digital Domain wanted to get into the video games business, so me and Chris McKibben, then CFO of DD, different Chris than Chris Trimmel, went around to all the big game companies in the United States and Japan trying to get someone to do a project with us. No one really wanted to do that because they rightly said we had no idea what we were doing. Don Matrick offered me and McKibben both jobs at EAC, so we thought about that and both took his offer. It was from this jumping of ship did Steve begin working on games. in the middle of an auto repair shop. With FMV the style at the time, there needed to be a warehouse open for Steve and his associates within EAC's software tools team to film. Recounting the incident, Steve explains that in the beginning, the EAC guys didn't believe in it, so we basically had no budget and we had to rent out the auto repair stall to use as our capture studio. The guys in the auto repair shops around us all thought we must be shooting porno movies because we brought in all this high-end camera gear. They kept wanting to know when the girls were going to be there. Unfortunately, it was just a bunch of geeky game developers. Later, we got a much nicer warehouse to work in. I know I only said it a few sentences ago, but remember how I brought up that FMV was hitting its stride at this point in time? Gray, through no small amount of clout, wormed his way into Square. I knew some Square guys from various places in the past, plus I've always been a fan of their games. When Sakaguchi-san asked me to join the company, I couldn't say yes fast enough. Some of the other guys at Square invited me to Tokyo to meet Sakaguchi, and we were in a private booth overlooking the massive dance club called Welfare. He asked me to join Square and put out his hand. I shook it, and the other Japanese guys asked me, "Do you know you just signed the deal?" To which I answered yes. Exposits grade to obsolete. The first project he'd be a part of? Squaresoft's horror RPG Parasite Eve. This wasn't without its own hardship, however, a language and dedication barrier making itself apparent between the Americans and Japanese. After a time and slightly managing some of the maps for Final Fantasy VII, Gray got the big idea to form his own company, the previously said Heavy Iron Studios. It was originally called Chemistry Entertainment. For a while, we partnered with the Canadian VFX company called Rainmaker. Heavy Iron didn't really 100% work out as we hoped, but a bunch of really great people worked there, many of whom have gone on to successful careers in the game industry. For example, my partner Marcel Samik went on to be CTO at EA LA for many years. Shinraz Akmel ran the central outsourcing group at THQ. Matt Kuhill continued to work at Heavy Iron for a long time and is now up in Seattle at Microsoft working cool stuff there, and many others, Steve recounts. In the big time, yeah. With nothing to do, a name was a name with no pull or sway, thus Heavy Iron sat and twiddled its thumbs before THQ gave them the Evil Dead deal. Was this a Trojan horse to acquire the fresh-faced developer? Probably, Gray putting it as. When we were starting on Evil Dead 1, it was going to be one of the biggest projects THQ had ever done, and they really wanted to have us be a part of THQ so that they would be building equity in the team. And honestly, Marcel and I were a bit tired of managing the company instead of making games, so we decided to join THQ. Of course, we also got paid some money. Stock. When I left THQ, their stock was at an all-time high. This was a good thing. Washing his hands free, we do the same with Steve, as from here I assume BfBBR went through what most uncatalogued licensed games development went through. Not critically praised, Battle became a cult hit amongst 3D platformer enthusiasts and speedrunners, so much so that THQ Nordic and Nickelodeon highlighted that discrepancy. On Nordic's official website, a press release announced that many Nick IPs were slated for the remastered treatment. The appetite for Nickelodeon content, old and new, continues to grow, and it's exciting to bring our beloved content to new audiences through this partnership with THQ Nordic. These titles were popular when they were first released, and we can't wait for fans around the world to rediscover their favorites, says John Roman, Senior Vice President, Toys, Nickelodeon. Following up, Adrian Lauer, VP Digital Sales and Business Development Americas at THQ Nordic, stated that this one hits close to home. We are very proud of signing this agreement, which was originally executed by the former THQ Inc. We believe the combination of strong licenses and solid, crisp gameplay was one of THQ Inc.'s trademark strategies, and we intend to continue this tradition. I am confident we chose one of the strongest partners for doing just that. It is a perfect fit for our asset care strategy, bringing back fan favorites, continuing to support legacy games, and make them available on current and even next-gen platforms. Handling the remaster was relative newcomer Purple Lamp Studios, makers of not much. They're an Austrian company birthed from the remnants of Sproing Interactive, so surprise, this is a Eurojank game, kinda. meeting those lofty heights set out by my forefathers. Announcing Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated on June 5th, 2019, it would see a demo at Gamescom before all standard copies of the game, Switch, PlayStation 4, Xbox, and PC, were released worldwide on June 23rd, 2020, with a Stadia, Phone, and Luna release coming later. And like with before, Purple Lamp saw some subsumption into THQ Nordic. The version I looked at was the Steam release. Up front, there isn't much of a plot to Rehydrated, so I won't spend a colossal waste of time here. One day, Plankton, up to his scheming, creates an army of robots but forgets to enforce his control over it, leaving a switch on his Duplicatotron on Don't Obey. Meanwhile, SpongeBob and Patrick, after a round of cowboys and robots, wish for actual robots to exist, which coincidentally comes to fruition when Plankton's robots trash Bikini Bottom. With the city's hope resting in their hands, SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy do battle against the Horde, coming out on top at the end of the day. For starters, this is a simple plot that would fit in the show. In fact, most of the writing and character moments are like that. There's no real analysis to be made outside of what I just said, but like with watching an episode of the show, the early episodes of the show, there's a cozy comfort to be had. Do I think the writing of the game is on par of some of the strongest episodes? No, this is definitely a B-side, but even then some of the weaker episodes of seasons 1 through 3 are leagues above the abyss that is some of the later seasons. This game is the equivalent of that, a funny observation as the rest of the SpongeBob games do follow that trend as well. And at the end of the day, this story is an excuse for gameplay, which it facilitates, so the bareness of it isn't too damaging, if that. Could this be one of the prettiest games I've played for the channel? Until I cover SMT Nocturne, Persona 5, or Killer 7, the answer is yes. Bubbly. Ha! And cartoony is the best description for how Rehydrated looks, especially in comparison to the original game. There was a layer of crust caking Battle for Bikini Bottom that has been shaved off for Rehydrated, but the appeal of the graphics hasn't been accidentally shredded in the revamp. Why I think this game looks much better than others that use hyper-realism lies in art direction. Why else would I mention 3 other games with a solid identity?
There's nothing like the smell of bubbles in the morning. Smells like victory. Take that! Just my size!
It helps that what Rehydrated is going for is Golden Age SpongeBob. Amongst the lineup of Nickelodeon shows, SpongeBob's flair stands out even amongst the other shows that are equally iconic. While Rehydrated and even the original can't match the lofty standards, boy does it come close. This is where I think Rehydrated's edge slips past vanilla as it leans extremely hard into the elements from the show. Before I get to the characters, the world of Bikini Bottom is fully realized, more so because a lot of winks and nods to the cartoon are strewn about. In the pineapple under the sea, you can find no more than at least 4 references to exact scenes of the show, such as SpongeBob with mystery and his time with a greaser's haircut. Can this be taken as empty nostalgia? Yeah, if you're cynical enough, but I look at this from a more optimistic angle, doubly so since I know what blasé pandering is. Operation Raccoon City saying hello. The art museum in Rock Bottom has its very own copy of Bold and Brash, so someone pulled it out of the trash. Same level, you can miss the bus grabbing a candy bar. The Goo Lagoon Caves have murals of SpongeGar and Pantar. Organic is how all this comes across. There's never any blinding spotlight shined onto these background elements telling you, "Remember these?"
I love opening presents.
This brings me to the characters, which are fluidly animated, not just in the action sense. Sure, when SpongeBob, Patrick, or Sandy are showing off their moves like Captain Falcon asks them for an audition, there's a lot of charm in how they bounce and attack. Befitting his bubble-blowing nature, SpongeBob's moveset is accentuated with bubble creations, while Patrick and Sandy rely on raw strength or finesse. There are a lot of visual differences between the three, and all, like the setting, have their personalities displayed perfectly. Where it goes above and beyond are the tiny details. Character interactions were bereft of overt emotion in the original. A character might display a specific one for a line of dialogue, then go back to their idle stance, but here we can actually see how the characters feel.
Ah, there you are, boy. Someone's broken the sea needle.
That's horrible. The sea needle is the cradle of Crochet Corner.
Yes, it is. But what's more important is that there are tikis and shiny objects just outside the windows.
Mr. Krabs, how can you think of money at a time like this?
Easy. I just clear my mind. Money, money, money. Now listen here, boy. You know that I'll give you golden spatulas if you bring me shiny objects. But I'm going to sweeten the deal. If you can break all the tikis here at the Sea Needle, I'll give you a bonus golden spatula.
Why would I want to break the tikis, Mr. Krabs?
Because they were laughing at you and calling you funny names.
What kind of funny names?
You know, SpongeBob Butt Pants.
That's not very funny.
No. But they said your mom was ugly.
Ugly? All right, Mr. Krabs, break them I shall. You've got a deal.
Even better than that, some lines have characters bring up props for a joke, such as SpongeBob with his library card or stamps. These weren't present in the original game, so it is nice to see what was added in. Audio-wise, this is more or less the same as the original, while most of the cast does a decent performance with the material. I have said before that this isn't premium SpongeBob writing.
SpongeBob, I'm actually glad you're here, believe it or not.
I'm glad I'm here too, Mrs. Puff.
The robots have stolen priceless artwork from the museum. If you can return it all to me, I'll reward you with a golden spatula.
Why do you want all that artwork?
Don't ask questions you aren't prepared to handle the answer to.
Consider the artwork saved, Mrs. Puff.
Blame that this is a game, so trying to follow how an episode would be is a misstep with the writing. It's not too egregious though, and as I have said, Battle is akin to a B-side episode. Here and there are moments of wit, but having to express gameplay ideas or objectives to the player takes precedent at times. Most of the cast was brought back, so Tom Kenny when he's not voicing Spyro NPCs or the dragon himself, Bill Fagerbach when he's not threatening to rip your nuts off, and Carolyn Lawrence when she's not crushing my hope as moral oral are all here, though Clancy Brown is not voicing Mr. Krabs. Instead, remake Chris Redfield himself, Joe White, takes the role. Those who have played other SpongeBob games, or if you favor 4D rides, know that whenever Clancy can't voice Krabs, White is the one in his place. Granted, almost all the audio within Rehydrated is recycled from the original, with only a few new lines added in this version.
I knew I shouldn't have made a copy of myself, but I'm just so cute. You've interfered with my plans for the last time. SpongeBob, meet SpongeBob.
Hi, how do you do? Allow me to introduce my friends, Patrick, Sandy.
Enough! Prepare to meet your doom.
The same goes for the music, but Jimmy Levine killed it with a varied but fitting score. From the tropical blends of surf guitar to the pumping beats of techno to indulging in classical heroic theming, the music for each stage fits. The rolling green tide of Jellyfish Fields has a jubilant and upbeat track, while the Dutchman's Graveyard has an almost eerie backbeat. All this leaves is the sound, which I find to be a tad wanting. Not all was ported to this port, so the funny sound effects when hitting citizens are gone, and there are a variety of issues surrounding the soundscape. Uncharacteristically quiet is how the game tends to be when these flare out, as some noises don't play properly or get cut off. Turns out the overwhelming lack of noise is more distracting than getting an earful, which was Base Battle's problem. This isn't the end of the glitches, but more on that later. SpongeBob SquarePants, Battle for Bikini Bottom, Rehydrated, no Kami Fujiwara, no Haruto. So that's how Musashi feels. Is a 3D action platformer with a multiplayer mode that I'm not looking at because I don't think a lot of other people did either. On a roll now, as this is the third game in a row without a difficulty select, but seeing as this is a literal game made for literal babies, if you're struggling, you're either too young to be watching my videos, in which case here's a prerequisite fuck to get you in trouble with your parents, or your IGN. Either way, I'm laughing my ass off. With Battle's status as a licensed game, it borrows heavily from contemporaries, particularly the level structure of Super Mario Sunshine. Starting up the game sees you inside SpongeBob's home, where you can get acquainted with the controls. Per almost every platformer ever, SpongeBob & Co. have access to basic movement maneuvers such as jumping and double jumping, as well as some attacks that have usage outside of combat, mostly pressing buttons to activate level geometry that may or may not be on a timer. Within the pineapple, you will see 3 of the few collectibles in the game. Shiny objects, underwear, and golden spatulas. Shiny objects are the currency of the game, found in the levels and the various tikis that all have different properties, and in enemies, shiny objects are needed to open up parts of levels or to acquire golden spatulas from Mr. Krabs. Underwear is your health. In the beginning, you can only soil 3 pairs before biting the big one and respawning at a checkpoint, but there is golden underwear that raises your max life up by 1, giving you a total of 6 hits by the end of the game. On the subject of dying, going out of bounds or falling into goo is a death sentence for everyone regardless of how many hits you have, though with water, the game does try to land you back on solid ground if you accidentally stumble in. This is height-based, so cannonballing will see you die. Golden spatulas are this game's equivalent of power stars or shine sprites. These are needed to unlock new levels and are rewarded for completing level tasks. A total of 75 is needed to complete the game, but there are 2 gates of 15 and 40 sectioning off the hub. Leaving the SquarePants residence takes you into Bikini Bottom, the main hub where you can select levels based on your golden spatula count, or trade in shiny objects or socks for them. Socks are the last of the standard collectibles, as some levels do have objectives based on fighting items, and belong to Patrick. In the robot rampage, they have stolen his socks and scattered them across the world. For every 10 you get, he gives you a golden spatula, so keep on the lookout. Progress in a stage is linear to a degree, as each level has a main goal with a variety of side tasks to complete. Take Jellyfish Fields. Getting King Jellyfish's jelly for Squidward is the focal point, but there are other spatulas to get while accomplishing that goal. Levels are on the bigger side, separated into sections. For Jellyfish, there's 4 areas, but the stages can vary in this aspect. Backtracking is in the game, but conveniently almost every spatula can be warped to via the start menu. As long as you've gone near the trigger for it, you can warp to it. This doesn't go for socks, but everything is tracked via the level select. Throughout your stay in Bikini Bottom, you'll have to deal with the Robot Menace. Outside of a few variants, a standard attack from each character should turn a robot into scrap. In the instances that isn't feasible, SpongeBob has access to a high jump attack and a ground pound plus the bubble bowl and cruise missile, all used in his puzzles after beating the 2 gate guardians of Robo Sandy and Patrick. The Starfish has 2 ground pounds and the ability to throw objects, which is used in a lot of his puzzles, and Sandy has her lasso that gives her Captain Falcon and Ganondorf's additional jump when used in the air. Covering bosses briefly, it's Mario affairs. I.E. Avoid attacks until the boss is vulnerable, hit, repeat until death. A key thing to know is that whenever you take damage, enemies will taunt you, and in the case of bosses, will sometimes cause them to start their attack cycle over. Throughout the levels, you might have to switch characters to accomplish tasks or go forward, thus there are bus stops that allow you to do so. Each level has predefined characters for it, so you'll never be able to play as all 3 in a level, and you can never start a stage as a different character other than SpongeBob. His name is in the title, and by golly, he's gonna take up most of the screen time. There are character-specific opportunities in some levels, such as the rope swings for Sandy, the throw fruits for Patrick, and the sponge ball as SpongeBob, but all are mostly puzzle-oriented. There are also the slides, which break up the gameplay, but outside of these elements, battle isn't anything you haven't seen before. Surprisingly, this game has a varied level structure. While some stages do overlap in ideas, like downtown Bikini Bottom and Rock Bottom's main spatula being connected to a level-wide scavenger hunt, how both get that across is different from the other. Downtown is more hub-like, embracing the game of hide-and-seek compared to Rock Bottom's stealthy straight-line excursion through the deep. Combat is much less prominent in Downtown as platforming takes center stage, while Rock Bottom has you constantly dealing with hordes of robots while going from section to section. The feel of the levels couldn't be any more different despite both having the same type of goal. Goo Lagoon and the Mermalair have level-wide puzzles, but while Lagoon highlights puzzle solving through platforming with the cave and kids, the Mermalair has actual puzzles with the funnels, the rotating power generators, and the Rube Goldberg machine. No joke, that might be one of my favorite sections in the game as it applies the bubble bowl in a creative manner while tackling something different. No other puzzle in the game is like it, much like Kelp Forest's cave. While I do think that on the whole, Kelp Forest is the weakest level in the game, neither standing out like the Dream or Mermalair and having ununified design elements, the third section, the Kelp Caves, embraces a concept that I wish the game did more of: using two characters to solve a problem. While I do like that there's diversity in the roster, there's little cohesion in the cast. Generally speaking, you're railroaded into a section as one character with maybe a single element that needs a stage's other character to solve. Section 2 of the Dutchman's Graveyard is the best example, as for a brief moment you need Sandy to cross a huge gap, then for the rest of the area you play as SpongeBob. Why even include Sandy? Kelp Caves, meanwhile, has you alternate between SpongeBob and Patrick to search for Barnacle Boy's crystals. From the ground up, this whole part of the level is designed with both in mind. Patrick needs to take advantage of his strength to get bounce leaves to grow by throwing around stone tikis, while SpongeBob has to unlock doors for Patrick to do so. While the constant switching can be annoying as there's no way to alternate between characters Lost Viking style, this uncut attempt should have been a key design philosophy for the entire game. As if underlining the point, in the main hall of the caves is a monsoon that will easily zap Patrick should he stray into the atrium. While he is helpless to the lightning onslaught, SpongeBob can and should take care of it so that his friend doesn't have to worry. On the topic of enemies, all are goofily animated and in theory should be fun to fight, but I'll go over that more in the next section. What I can say here is that when Rehydrated does try to challenge the player in interesting ways, it can. The Dream is all about this, specifically Mr. Krabs' Dream. Before that, I enjoyed the sampler platter approach, which the Dream does better than Kelp Forest that the stage has, with a slide in Sandy's, a platforming extravaganza in Squidward's, a combat gauntlet in Krabs', and an oddball in Patrick's. Drawing back to the show, as this whole level is inspired by the Dream episode, all Patrick dreamed of was riding a kiddie ride that he had to pay money for, so his segment lacking any challenge for SpongeBob to overcome is the perfect joke to make. Back to Mr. Krabs', it is through this moment do you see how fun the combat can truly be. Ducking and dodging while managing different typings of robots is fun. The peak of the game, however, is the peaks of Sand Mountain. Unlike every other level in Rehydrated, Sand Mountain's gimmick overtakes traditional gameplay. As opposed to jumping and bashing robots, you are instead racing against the clock on the various slides to beat time trials. This simple deviation is enough to make the whole area my favorite section, as the rush is unlike anything else in the game. There's escalation to Sand Mountain too. Starting with Miss Puff on Guppy Mound, her time is the easiest to beat. She consistently gets pushed down the slopes by kids, so of course her time wouldn't be all that great. Then Bubble Buddy comes in. While following the path can cut his time close, you're rewarded more for understanding which route is the fastest. Why take a winding path when one is a straight line? This is capstoned with Larry. On top of needing to understand course layout, you won't beat his time unless you employ speed strats. Why go down the winding path when you can jump to its bottom? There is nothing stopping you from skipping whole slide sections with creative jumping. In fact, that is highly encouraged. Permeating throughout the entirety of Rehydrated, and this applies to the original as well, is the stench of combat, a cardinal sin that I think a lot of platformers seem to indulge in. Perhaps this is why I tend to steer clear of the genre, as my childhood was full of action platformers with lackluster combat. Sonic Heroes, Rayman 3, Crash to the Titans, and this game didn't help my growing opinion. If you haven't hazarded a clue, my main complaint is that outside a scant few robots, most can be taken down with any character's basic attack. Sure, each enemy is varied in appearance and attack, but at the end of the day, they all go down the same. While early encounters don't reek of this issue, come the later gauntlets is this problem staring you in the face. What hides my pickle is that there can be interesting mashups of enemies, but the game rarely puts these groups together, preferring to busy you with one-offs or the same robot in greater numbers. Mr. Krabs' dream displays that with the right groupings, combat can be akin to a platforming challenge. This isn't even an issue tied to too much happening on screen. While for a younger player, facing off against a couple slicks and tublets may seem strenuous, their attack patterns are easy to decipher. Every so often, a slick will lead a shot that will linger on the floor, causing the player to slip around, while the tublet's bottom ring will spit fire out in a circle indefinitely until it is hit. Neither attack pairs in such a way that it is impossible to dodge. Fanciful footwork is required, but fighting both at the same time isn't a death sentence. The comparison here would be the Krusty Krab fight that has this poor pairing of sleepyheads, chucks, and bzz bots making nowhere safe in the cramped restaurant. Simultaneously, Rehydrated suffers from opposite ends, having boring fight structure while throwing unfair combinations at the player. Shifting to level layout, each is fine in its own right, but the necessity of spending shiny objects pops my bubble. While the times that you do are few and far between, in numerous instances it's only for a dirty sock. Rock Bottom is the prime example, as next to the laser machines you have to pay near 2,000 objects just to get one of Patrick's collectibles. And though I prefer Sand Mountain out of this lineup, it's a giant paywall, sacking you for nearly 7,000. This pales in comparison to Mr. Krabs in the long run. Good to know that even in game form, he's a greedy son of a bitch. To 100% the game, 108,000 shiny objects are needed to be given to Mr. Krabs. How do you get that many? Bashing your head on the slopes of Sand Mountain. Oh, you think I'm kidding? One of the easiest ways to rack up shiny objects is by slamming into the tikis on the slopes, dying, and repeating the cycles of suffering until you wish you were no longer trapped in them. Get a podcast going. Hell, leave one of my longer videos in the background as it will take you a while. The tedium is heavy enough to outweigh an elephant, and you'd prefer to be crushed by one. Some of the socks as well fall under this criticism, but they aren't too taxing to find. Rounding out, as there isn't a whole lot to complain about, despite holding the title of Rehydrated, this remaster is scuffed. Eurojank at its finest, with glitches not even native to the original. If this was merely that game, I wouldn't be too harsh and would laugh at some that happen. Bomb bots have an interesting habit of getting stuck or careening off ledges to their doom, which is a funny visual and fits the theming of SpongeBob, but when audio quality can be poor and some sound effects don't play, there are jabs to be made. Battle had its fair share of odd sound direction. A positive of Rehydrated is that the fly noise has been toned way down so that it doesn't bug buzz my eardrums to oblivion, but then why is there a 50-50 chance of the robot alert sound not playing? Thankfully, getting caught off guard is an impossibility, but the lack of effect is distracting, a perfect adjective to use and congruent with the various clippings and lack thereof. Like, the effort to remove the jank has caused new forms of it to appear. File this under Silent Hill collection as how's that possible? Dying via Hans can lead to questionable placement on a respawn, as while he's programmed to put you back near a checkpoint unless stated otherwise, see trespassing in the main hub. In levels proper, he can put you wherever the fuck he wants. Riding down the final slope in Jellyfish Fields, I fell out of bounds, letting the sailor put me back on course. Literally. That wouldn't have happened in vanilla. How about Patrick T-posing in the prelude to Robot SpongeBob? During the Sea Needle Tiki hunt, I destroyed them all, but Mr. Krabs didn't award me with the golden spatula unless I approached him from a specific entryway. Hitting the lower weak points on Robo Sponge has to be done with the cruise missile, while in Chocolate you could use the Bubble Bowl. His karate attack is off as well. The only way to dodge the new version is by outspeeding it, unlike Base Edition. The physics are also a bit off for the Bubble Bowl and moving ball objects. All in all, for this to be considered a remaster is a tad misleading. If you've never played Battle for Bikini Bottom in your life, I would say hold off on picking up Rehydrated. A lot of your enjoyment for the game is based on past experiences with the original, so if there is no attachment, Rehydrated can come across as a standard platformer with nothing special regarding it besides the SpongeBob aesthetic. But for those who have played the original, while Rehydrated does stumble in parts, it tries to be a faithful recreation of the original with some added flair. The audio and physics are the main gripes, but the improved visuals are a plus and the gameplay is still the same. This is why I said at at the top that both are their own experience. To me, I enjoy Rehydrated as much as the original as this licensed game that didn't have to go as hard as it did, but it wanted to for posterity's sake. Who would have thought I would tie Parasite Eve to SpongeBob of all properties? Well, one of the games is good through and through. 2 isn't as great, but at least it isn't the third birthday, where dreams die in a torrent of somewhat interesting ideas marred by poor execution and storytelling. The opposite of Resonance of Fate, where the complexity of the gameplay hurts the overall product. Don't ask me how long I've spent in that game's tutorial learning about triangle attacks and the mini systems within it. Visually stunning, but like playing with a spreadsheet. Now that I think about it, Parasite Eve and SpongeBob are kinda alike, seeing as those series got worse and worse as they went on. Hot take alert, I don't care for the movie game as much, and past that, you have Lights, Camera, Pants, True for Sponge, and Hero Pants, which aren't good. Same goes for most of the net games, actually. Shadow Showdown, Jet Fusion, Attack of the Twonkies, Unite, Volcano Island, Toybots, Globs of Doom. Maybe the Korra game was good, and I know the original Tak trilogy was fun, but those are few and far between. This showing of SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated is over, but stay tuned for our next feature involving an Amnesiac, an Event Horizon, and a remastered Never Meant to Be.